We're taking the entire, 5,000-year span of the multiverse's most foundational plot, all of its catastrophic wars, its brilliant empires, its devastating resets, and we're going to try and distill it all down into a single, cohesive narrative.
We are charting a history that, it doesn't even run in a straight line.
Yeah.
It's all about these relentless cycles of expansion and then, boom, cosmic collapse.
So if you're looking for a complete shortcut, a way to understand the entire scope of the multiverse, this is it.
Exactly. From the primordial elder dragon right up to the literal fracturing of reality that's happening as we speak. This is your map.
Okay, let's unpack that mission a bit. We're trying to trace this history from a purely in-universe perspective, and when you do that, you see this repeating struggle, this pattern.
Right. It's this constant violent battle between the forces of, let's call it, messy organic life.
And the calculated, clinical, almost sterile ambition of artificial power.
And if you're looking for the one thread that connects all these thousands of years, it has to be the Planeswalker spark.
It's more than just a plot device.
So much more. It's a metaphysical anomaly. It serves as both the greatest instrument for salvation. It's the only thing that can really stop a Yawgmoth or a Bolas.
But it's also the problem.
Paradoxically, yes. It's the main source of the instability and the conflict that drives the entire story forward. It is, in a way, the unstable engine of reality itself.
We've compiled a whole stack of historiographical texts, charting events from the moment the first civilizations rose on Dominaria right through to the crises of the last few years.
But this history doesn't begin with civilization. Not really. To get the stakes, you have to go back further. You have to start with the beings of raw, untamed power.
Which takes us all the way back to the primordial era.
Before the Thran, before the first humans were even building cities. The multiverse was shaped by this titanic conflict called the Elder Dragon War.
And this wasn't just a skirmish.
Oh, no. This was a devastating, world-shaping conflict where these magnificent, godlike creatures fought for supremacy, for control of the world's nascent mana systems.
The war was so all-consuming that it basically culled the entire Elder Dragon population. It left just a handful of survivors.
Only 5. And if you're taking notes, these are the names that are going to matter for everything that follows. Nicol Bolas, Ugin, Arcade, Sabbath, Chromium, and Palladium Wars.
And that conflict right there, that establishes the core rivalry that drives the next 5,000 years of plots.
It's all there in the beginning. Nicol Bolas survives with this almost pathological need for total dominion. He sees the multiverse as his personal sandbox.
And he'll use anything to win. Ruthless manipulation, incredibly intricate long-term planning.
And just immense raw power. Then opposing him, you have his brother, Ugin, the spirit dragon.
Right. Where Bolas is all about control, Ugin is about balance.
His entire existence became dedicated to understanding the structure of the blind eternities. That's the chaotic space between planes. And more importantly, ensuring the equilibrium of these planar ecosystems.
So dominion versus balance.
That's the philosophical engine of the whole story right there.
Okay. Shifting forward, we leave the smoke and fire of the Elder Dragon War, and we land on Dominaria, which is, the ancestral hearth of the multiverse.
It really is the center of everything for a long, long time.
And here, roughly 5 millennia before a guy named Urza is even a thought, we see the rise of the Thran Empire.
This was arguably the absolute apex of all pre-modern civilizations. We're talking a level of sophistication that isn't seen again for thousands of years.
They were engineers, architects.
On a scale we can barely imagine. Their entire society was built on the mastery of power stones. And we need to be really clear about what these were.
They weren't just batteries.
No, not at all. They were manatite crystals that could hold and regulate just immense quantities of raw magical energy.
And these things powered everything. Flying cities, legions of sophisticated mechanical soldiers.
It was the height of magical artifice. It was technological perfection, or so it seemed.
But the seeds of its failure were already sown.
They always are. We think of Yawgmoth as this original cosmic monster, but his rise is a deeply human story of political opportunism. He started as a brilliant physician.
But he exploited a profound vulnerability within the Thran society, something called physis.
Right, and let's define that for a moment, because this isn't just a common cold.
Well, no.
Physis was a severe degenerative wasting condition, a sickness caused by prolonged exposure to the raw, unregulated radiation from the very same power stones that gave them all their power.
So their greatest strength, their flying cities, was also poisoning them from the inside.
It was their greatest internal weakness, a slow, agonizing death. And Yawgmoth, being brilliant and utterly ruthless, recognized this internal rot and leveraged the epidemic to seize absolute political control.
He didn't position himself as just a healer.
He positioned himself as the only person who could administer the cure. He weaponized their fear.
And the cure proposed wasn't exactly medicinal.
Not in any traditional sense. It was an ideology. He called it perfection. Yawgmoth believed that that all organic life was inherently flawed, just destined for decay.
And salvation lay in merging with machines.
Exactly, shedding their organic weakness, achieving a kind of biomechanical immortality through surgical and mechanical integration.
That is a radical step, even for a society on the brink of collapse. How did that ideology find its terrifying ultimate home?
That's where the artificial plane of Phyrexia comes in. And what's fascinating and often misunderstood is that Yawgmoth didn't build Phyrexia.
He found it.
He found it. It was a pre-existing plane, already structured as 9 concentric spheres. Yawgmoth, now this radicalized leader with a massive following, just claimed it as his personal laboratory and warped its existing machinery to serve his vision of mechanical perfection.
So he took this abandoned artificial world and turned it into a factory for biomechanical horror, the war that must have followed.
It was devastating. The last remnants of the True Thran Empire versus Yawgmoth's burgeoning Phyrexians. It led to the complete self-destruction of the Thran.
How did it end?
The conflict concluded when the Thran hero, Dyfed, managed to seal the main portal connecting Dominaria and Phyrexia. It was a monumental act of cosmological containment.
Okay, so the immediate crisis was averted, the world was saved, portal sealed. But this is where the long game truly begins, isn't it? They didn't just walk away clean.
They absolutely did not. While they managed to seal the door, they failed to cleanse the contagion. The Phyrexians left behind, whether it was deliberate or just residual contamination, we don't know for sure, the glistening oil.
And this wasn't just sludge.
No, this is a viral, self-replicating liquid metal substance. It is the ultimate biological time bomb, planting the seeds of corruption that would inevitably lead to every single major multiversal downfall in the future. It's the promise of Phyrexia's return, guaranteed.
Okay, so we jump forward 5,000 years. We're past the ruins of the Thran. We land in a time of sort of rebuilding and rediscovery. And this culminates in the Argivian Reckoning.
A conflict better known as the Brothers' War. And this war is so pivotal, so devastating, that it acts as the new year zero for Dominarian history. It anchors the entire AR calendar.
And at its heart, the Brothers' War is a tragedy of genius and ego.
Profound ego. Urza and Mishra, the 2 central figures, were these brilliant apprentices to an archaeologist named Tucasia. They were just obsessively delving into the ruins of the Thran.
And their intellectual rivalry turned destructive when they made the ultimate find, right? At the ancient Thran city of Koilos.
That's where they unearthed the secret heart of the Thran, and more importantly, the Might Stone and the Weak Stone.
2 halves of one giant power stone.
A single colossal Thran power stone. And their inability to agree on who should control these artifacts, that's what immediately escalated their intellectual sparring into a literal world war.
And it wasn't just a feud. This thing spiraled. It became a continental conflict that spanned over 6 decades.
Oh yeah, it converted almost every kingdom and nation on the continent into a war economy. This was the industrial escalation in full force.
So between roughly 30 and 60 AR, what did that look like?
You had Urza, who allied with the wealthy kingdom of Yotia, and he leveraged their resources to build a vast army of automatons.
And Mishra.
Mishra, on the other hand, he aligned with the desert-dwelling Phylagi people, and he specialized in mastering machine reconstruction, repurposing these ancient, dangerous Thran artifacts.
You have to understand the scale of this war. We're talking about massive, titanic constructs battling across the continent.
Entire forests were leveled. The skies were just darkened by fleets of ornithopters. It was an apocalyptic technological arms race. All this engineering genius turned purely toward mutual assured destruction.
And this is where we see the first explicit return of that ancient threat.
Exactly. The conflict wasn't purely fueled by fraternal hatred. Agents of that lingering, exiled Phyrexian consciousness, the Jixians, they were actively influencing Mishra from behind the scenes.
So Mishra was essentially being fed military tech and dark ideas by Yawgmoth's old agents. Classic manipulation.
It was. The Jixians corrupted him so completely that he underwent a process we can call a precursor to modern completion.
Okay, that's a critical term. What is completion?
It's the agonizing, permanent merging of living tissue with mechanical Phyrexian components, all driven by the glistening oil. Long before the main invasion, Mishra's body and mind were hijacked, transforming him into the first major pawn in Phyrexia's 5,000-year plan.
The conflict then reaches its terrifying peak, the terminal phase, around 63 AR.
On the island of Argoth. And that's where Urza has this moment of horrific realization.
He sees that the brother he's been fighting, he's gone.
He's gone. He's been replaced by a hollow shell, an instrument of pure Phyrexian malice. And that recognition forced Urza's hand into the ultimate, desperate, and catastrophic decision.
He used the Golgothian Silex,
An artifact sourced by the Neutral Third Path, a group of mages just trying to stop both brothers. But it was essentially a doomsday device.
and the Silex blast was world-changing in the most literal sense.
It physically shattered the continent of Phyrexia, broke it into islands and shards, but the environmental impact was even worse. It shifted Dominaria's very orbit, plunging the entire plane into an immediate devastating nuclear winter.
And yet, amidst all this destruction, a planeswalker is born.
The immense force of the blast, all that raw energy, it triggered Urza's dormant spark. The Might Stone and the Weak Stone, the two artifacts at the very heart of the conflict, they fused onto his body. They became his new eyes.
Giving him a source of godlike power.
In that single moment, he simultaneously ended the war and created the most powerful adversary Phyrexia would face for the next 3 millennia.
The environmental fallout from the Silex blast was immediate and just crushing. We enter a period known as the Dark.
And it's not just a climate change, it's a total social and technological collapse.
The loss of all that advanced Thrawn and Argivian artifice was swift.
It was absolute. Society just couldn't cope. The trauma of the orbital shift, the constant ash fall, the endless night, it created this massive spiritual and political vacuum.
And fear rushed in to fill that vacuum.
Almost always in the form of religious extremism. This is where we see this intense resurgence of fanaticism. People needed a scapegoat for their ruined world, and they focused on the source of the power.
Magic itself.
That's right. Groups like the Order of Labor and the notorious Feralites, they began a continent-wide magical inquisition. They viewed any practitioner of magic as directly responsible for the ruin of the world.
Which led to widespread persecution, a deep intellectual retreat across Dominaria.
Civilization was actively dismantling itself.
The tragedy of Sarpedia is a perfect, heartbreaking case study of this. It's often called the Fallen Empire's era.
And here you see 5 distinct major civilizations collapse not from an external invasion, but from their own inability to adapt to this new, brutally cold environment.
Let's break those down, because they each illustrate a different way the world broke.
Okay, so first, take the Acacia, the human empire, a bastion of white-aligned law and order, but they were overwhelmed from within. First by the Fairlight Zealots, who turned their society against itself.
And then by simple starvation?
Exactly. The catastrophic loss of their grain stores due to the cooling climate. They were consumed by faith and famine.
And then you had the Vodalia merfolk.
Their society was structured around the coastal shelf. The Silex blast shifted the orbit, triggered these massive, unprecedentedly cold ocean currents. They lost their territory, their population plummeted.
Then they were
Replaced by a new, aggressive species, the Homerid, essentially giant, aggressive, shrimp-like creatures that thrived in the cold water.
Meanwhile, the Havenwood elves, they were facing famine in their freezing forests, and they tried a biological solution.
They created the Thalids, these fungal creatures designed purely for quick, sustainable food.
But the biological solution became a biological threat.
Precisely. The Thalids developed a collective, viral hive intelligence. They were designed to be food, but they achieved sentience and overwhelmed the elves who created them, absorbing their forests and their culture. A truly tragic, ironic end.
And maybe the most dramatic collapse was the Order of Ebon Hand?
The black-aligned necromancers of the South. They had specialized in breeding these creatures called thralls.
For what purpose?
Exclusively for slave labor and gruesome sacrifice. They treated them as mindless property. But their brutal existence somehow spurred a rapid evolutionary leap.
The thralls achieved sentience.
Consciousness born from suffering. And they staged a massive, bloody rebellion, completely overthrowing and destroying their masters. The cruelty they inflicted was ultimately turned right back on them.
So by the time the full Ice Age settles in, Sarpedia is a ghost continent, utterly ruined.
But the Silex blast had a cosmological consequence that went far beyond Dominaria's surface. It created the Shard of 12 Worlds. What does that mean for us?
It means the plane was essentially quarantined.
Exactly. The blast created this massive planar distortion, isolating Dominaria and 11 other planes from the rest of the multiverse for centuries. No external planeswalkers could reliably get in or out. Dominaria was locked in a perpetual frozen winter.
And during this isolation, the Ice Age narrative took shape. We saw the rise of this powerful, dark figure, Limdul.
A necromage who commanded vast, undead legions across the frozen wastelands of Kajol and Adarkar, reflecting the deep, dark magic that really thrived under that endless night.
This deep winter, this isolation, it finally concluded almost 3,000 years after the Silex blast.
Right around 2934 AR, the planeswalker Freyalise, utilizing this massive accumulation of wild, untapped mana from the long winter, combined with key artifacts left behind by Urza, she casts the World Spell.
And this shattered the shard.
It shattered the isolation. It allowed the global climate to slowly begin its return to normalcy. But again, an act of salvation created a new vulnerability. By shattering the isolation, it reopened the door for external threats,
including the ultimate engineered return of the full Phyrexian plot.
Their maneuvers on Dominaria could begin once more.
Now we enter the era where Urza, the ancient planeswalker, truly takes on his role as the immortal architect of resistance.
He's been alive for millennia at this point, preparing for the inevitable return of Yawgmoth and Phyrexia. This preparation becomes his monumental long-term endeavor.
We call this Urza's long game, specifically the Bloodline Project.
Urza was convinced that he alone couldn't defeat Yawgmoth. The war would have to be fought by mortal agents. So he engaged in generations of genetic, cultural, and political manipulation of various Dominarian peoples. The entire goal was to produce a specific lineage, a heroic crew, and a singular hero capable of wielding the legacy, his vast collection of anti-Phyrexian artifacts. It was utilitarianism on a scale we can't fathom.
And the centerpiece of this engineered resistance, the core of the legacy, was the interplanar skyship, the Weatherlight.
This wasn't just a boat, it was an artifact capable of traveling between planes, powered by its own specialized complex mechanisms.
And the Weatherlight crew was the culmination of his genetic engineering.
Captain Sisay, the Golem Karn, the healer Aurum, the Major Tai. But the intended final hero of the line was Gerard Capuchin, the final product of those thousands of years of planning and often very cruel manipulation.
And the saga kicks off when Sisay is kidnapped by Volrath.
Volrath, the Evankar, the supreme commander of the artificial plane of Wrath, which is the Phyrexian staging ground for the invasion.
And here's the inevitable, painful twist of the Bloodline plot.
Volrath is revealed to be Vuel, Gerard's bitter childhood rival. Vuel was taken and corrupted by Phyrexian agents, likely exposed to early completion, and installed as the commander of the invasion force.
So that staging ground, Wrath, brings us to Phyrexia's second major strategy, the Rothi overlay. What was the physical mechanism of this attack?
It was essentially planar geometry leveraged for a military invasion. Wrath was a plane composed almost entirely of flowstone, a mutable, self-shaping organic and metal material.
So they could reshape the plane itself.
The strategy was to manipulate the planar boundaries, using Wrath as a giant, malleable war machine to overlay itself directly onto Dominaria.
So they literally merged the two worlds.
Precisely. This action allowed for the instantaneous mass teleportation of millions of Phyrexian soldiers, a precursor to the march of the machine, right into the heart of Dominaria. This was not a subtle infiltration.
No, this was the ultimate direct invasion.
The most devastating conflict the plane had seen since the Silex blast itself.
The war then escalated to the apocalypse. Yawgmoth himself, after waiting millennia, finally made his physical entrance onto Dominaria.
And he manifested not as a single being, but as this colossal, swirling cloud of death and disease, intent on completing the entire plane instantly.
The entire world was on the brink of absolute submission.
The only thing that could stop it was the activation of Urza's grand design, the legacy weapon.
And what did that activation require?
It demanded the ultimate sacrifice. The weapon was a unified system. It required the Weatherlight, the Might Stone, and the Weak Stone, the two power stones Urza had carried in his eyes for centuries, to be brought together.
But the final critical component
was the life force of the engineered hero Gerard Capuchin. He sacrificed himself to complete the circuit.
And that massive blast of pure white mana destroyed Yawgmoth's avatar. The invasion was halted, but the consequences of the weapon's activation were enormous.
Oh, were. The Silver Golem Karn, who had been Urza's constant companion and was deeply linked to the Might Stone and Weak Stone, he inherited Urza's planeswalker spark in the aftermath.
He became the first artificial planeswalker.
A silver beacon of salvaged humanity. He then departed Dominaria, traveling into the blind eternities to create his own plane, Argenda. And we have to remember this single act because it is the genesis of the new Phyrexian threat.
Following the invasion and Yawgmoth's defeat, Dominaria was just shattered, utterly shattered. The focus shifted to the continent of Otaria,
Where Karn, completely unknowingly, left behind a catastrophic parting gift, the Mirari.
an artifact of immense, unstable magical power.
It acted as an amplifier, not just boosting spells, but wildly amplifying the deepest desires, the greed, the paranoia of anyone near it. It fueled a relentless series of chaotic wars. The Cabal, the Order, the Merfolk. It turned Otaria into a battleground defined by chaotic wish fulfillment.
This era is defined by these tragic, power-crazed figures. You see, Kamal, the barbarian protagonist, repeatedly succumbed to the Mirari's influence.
He goes through these cycles of power, destruction, and then eventual remorse before he finally becomes the grounded guardian of the Frozen Forest.
And then there are the three central, tragic figures of manufactured conflict.
Phage, the bringer of death, who was originally the restored planeswalker Jessica, and Akroma, the angelic avenger created by the wizard Ixidor, to pursue Phage.
The conflict between these two became so violent, so all-consuming, that they eventually merged together.
They fused into Corona, the false god. Corona was a being of unstable, pure power, a physical manifestation of the multiverse's instability and the amplified desires that created her. Her existence was so disruptive, so cosmologically volatile,
She had to be assassinated.
by her own acolytes, just to return a fragile sense of order to the broken plane.
But the escalating magical wars and the Mirari's chaos were just symptoms. The true problem was a much deeper cosmological instability, the time spiral crisis.
Correct. The lingering, unresolved effects of the Silax blast from millennia earlier, combined with the massive planar magic used in the Yawgmoth invasion.
And the planeswalker Teferi's desperate action of phasing his nation, Zalfir, out of time.
All of these stresses created critical weaknesses in the very fabric of reality.
And these weaknesses manifested as time rifts across Dominaria. Tell us exactly why these rifts were so dangerous.
They were actively bleeding the plane of its raw mana. They were wounds in the space-time continuum that threatened not just to destroy Dominaria, but to destabilize and dissolve the entire multiverse. This was reality collapsing on a fundamental physics level.
So how do you repair reality itself when the fundamental laws are breaking down?
The solution was the most drastic shift in the multiverse's history. The Great Mending, which happened around 4500 AR.
A core group of planeswalkers, Teferi, Venser, and Jessica, who had been restored, they sacrificed their eternal sparks to seal those rifts.
This is the moment that redefines everything. We need to be crystal clear about the tangible difference between a pre-mending and a post-mending planeswalker.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Pre-mending planeswalkers were effectively immortal, godlike, omnipotent entities. They aged incredibly slowly, they could reshape planes with a thought, and their very presence could warp local reality.
So, pre-mending Urza could engineer entire bloodlines and cause a nuclear winter. Got it.
Precisely. Post-mending planeswalkers, however, became mortal. They retained the ability to planeswalk, to travel between planes, but they lacked the massive reserves of mana, the godlike invulnerability and influence they once held.
So this sudden, massive reduction in power.
The removal of the god from the equation, that defined all the conflicts that followed.
The Great Mending saved reality from temporal collapse, but it simultaneously created a power vacuum. And this was the perfect opportunity for the multiverse's oldest, most ambitious villain.
Nicol Bolas.
The mending didn't destroy him, but it left the Elder Dragon depowered. It stripped him of his cosmic omnipotence.
And Bolas became consumed by one singular driving purpose, reclaiming his lost divinity. He spent decades orchestrating these incredibly complex interplanar schemes, essentially treating hundreds of worlds as pawns in his grand personal ascent ritual.
His goal was just to harvest the maximum amount of mana and souls for his ascension.
That was it, and he started by targeting Alara. Alara was unique. It was 5 world fragments separated from millennia, each developing into a distinct society defined by a limited spectrum of mana. Bolas manipulated them into merging in an event called the Conflux.
His genius was in realizing that the catastrophic collision would unleash this massive, unique mana maelstrom.
Exactly. He intended to feed on that power, a quick fix for his lost spark. And though the Leonin planeswalker, Johnny Goldmane, ultimately repelled him, the Conflux succeeded. The planes merged, and Bolas was driven off, but he'd gotten his meal.
His biggest success, which also proved to be his ultimate downfall, came on Zendikar.
The Zendikar release was a masterstroke of manipulation. He orchestrated a plan that required the innocent involvement of the next generation of post-mending planeswalkers, Jace Beleren, Chandra, and Sarkhan.
He tricked them.
He tricked them into opening the Eye of Eugen, a complex prison structure intended to hold the Eldrazi.
And opening that prison released these colossal ancient titans from the blind eternities that existed just to consume planes whole, an instant world-ending threat.
The devastation on Zendikar. The sheer horror of seeing entire populations simply consumed by these incomprehensible entities. It was the ethical breaking point for many of these young planeswalkers.
They realized that just being powerful wasn't enough. They had to be responsible.
That moral outrage, that realization of an existential threat greater than any single villain, led directly to the formation of the Gatewatch, a team of planeswalkers who took a formal, binding oath to defend the multiverse from all existential threats.
And the conflict then built toward the inevitable climax of Bolas's grand plan, the War of the Spark,
which he chose to stage on the sprawling, multi-tiered city plane of Ravnica. His strategy here was diabolical.
He created the perfect prison.
First, he stole the planar bridge from Kaladesh, a technology that can transport non-living matter between planes. That let him move his forces.
And then he stole the immortal sun from Ixalan,
an artifact specifically designed to prevent planeswalkers from planeswalking off the plane where it resides. He used those two artifacts to set the ultimate trap,
locking dozens of planeswalkers, all the most powerful figures in the multiverse, onto Ravnica. They couldn't escape, and he could bring in his army.
Once they were trapped, he unleashed his Dread Horde, an enormous army of undead warriors called Eternals, raised and weaponized on a Munket to harvest their captured sparks. This was the final ritual for his ascension.
A desperate final battle.
The Gatewatch, the Ravnican guilds, every trapped planeswalker fighting to prevent cosmic deification. The war concluded with immense cost.
Gideon Jura, the paragon of justice, made the ultimate sacrifice.
He used his own life to shield and save Liliana Vess, and that single act motivated Liliana to betray Bolas, turning the Dread Horde, her own legions of undead, against their master.
So Bolas was finally defeated, stripped of his spark entirely.
Imprisoned in his own desolate meditation realm, eternally guarded by his brother Eugen. This felt like the definitive end of the cosmic narrative, but it was merely the prelude to the real threat.
While the entire multiverse was consumed by the dramatic machinations of an elder dragon, that silent, viral plot sown 5,000 years ago with the glistening oil.
It had been reaching its terrible mechanical fruition.
On Karn's artificial plane, Argentum.
Remember, Argentum was the world Karn created, and the glistening oil, which he unknowingly carried as residual corruption from the Weakstone, completely and systematically corrupted the entire plane.
Argentum was renamed Mirrodin, and later, terrifyingly, New Phyrexia.
Now led by 5 powerful praetors, each embodying a distinct philosophy of completion and a different color of mana.
What makes this threat so much more dangerous than Yawgmoth's original invasion? Yawgmoth was a godlike entity.
But Yawgmoth was ultimately contained to Dominaria. New Phyrexia, led by the fanatical praetor Elesh Norn, possessed a collective viral ambition for multiversal perfection. They had transcended a planar threat and become a truly cosmic one.
Capable of mass propagation across realities.
And they realized this ambition with the March of the Machine. Elesh Norn seized absolute control and grew the Realmbreaker, the invasion tree.
Tell us about this structure.
Realmbreaker was a grotesque, biomechanical structure that acted as a multiversal conduit. Its roots physically pierced the boundaries of countless planes simultaneously.
This wasn't a slow, staged invasion like Wrath.
No, this was an instantaneous, simultaneous assault across planes that had no concept of Phyrexia worlds, like the Norse-inspired Kaldheim, the futuristic Kamigawa, and countless others. It was the first true multiversal war in recorded history.
The sheer scale of that conflict is unimaginable. How was an invasion that attacked multiple planes at once finally halted?
It required a monumental, coordinated effort and immense sacrifice. The angelic planeswalker Elspeth Tyrell returned as an archangel and provided a critical point of resistance.
And there was a rebellion from within.
The rebellion of the Red Praetor Erebrask provided a vital internal fissure, weakening Elesh Norn's core control. But the ultimate solution came from the Dryad planeswalker, Wrenn,
who made the ultimate sacrifice.
She bonded with Realmbreaker itself, and using its grotesque structure, she phased the entire plane of New Phyrexia into a remote pocket dimension,
trading its place with the long-lost nation of Zhalfir, which reappeared on Dominaria centuries after Teferi phased it out.
It was a bizarre, magical, geopolitical swap that saved the multiverse. But this victory came at a profound cost. It signaled the end of the Planeswalkers' great age.
It did. The high magical cost of the war included a secondary disparkening, where many planeswalkers lost their sparks. But the most permanent change was the appearance of omen paths.
This changes everything. For you, for the average person in the multiverse, the arrival of omen paths means the multiverse is now fundamentally porous and interconnected.
These are natural or lingering portals.
That allow non-planeswalkers to travel freely, or at least randomly, between worlds. The age of the omnipotent spark is over. We are now in the omen path era, defined by the democratization of interplanar travel.
And this new status quo immediately led to new conflicts. We're seeing a new kind of adventure, like the Girapur Grand Prix on Avishkar, which was formerly Kaladesh.
A multiplanar race, spanning Avishkar, Amonkhet, and the untamed wilds of Muruganda. And the participants highlight the new stakes. You have Chandra Nalaar trying to rescue her mysterious companion Lute.
You have the inventor Duretti, who lost his planeswalker status and is desperate to reclaim it.
And even agents like Winter, seeking the race's grand prize for a demonic master from Duskmourn.
And the prize itself is the ultimate symbol of this new era, the Aether Spark.
An artificial planeswalker spark, created by the inventor Ishikari during the invasion. This artifact represents both a new hope, the potential for anyone to planeswalk, and a profound threat.
The total weaponization of planeswalking power, making the ability a manufactured resource.
Exactly. And while all this is happening in the familiar central planes, on the absolute fringes of reality, we are seeing cosmic conflicts that predate even the dragons. We're talking about the edge of eternities in the Sothera system.
A region bordering the absolute blind eternities, home to advanced interplanar civilizations locked in a desperate civil war.
The Monoists, a profoundly fatalist group, are trying to accelerate their sun's collapse into a supervoid, believing it's a doorway to paradise. They're opposed by the Summists and the Sunstar Free Company.
And leveraging this cosmic chaos is none other than Tezzeret.
Now with an indestructible darksteel body, exploiting the Civil War to monopolize the ice water trade, establishing a massive criminal consortium. Even as reality breaks, the biggest players are still obsessed with resource control.
But the most immediate, critical danger we're tracking comes from the reality fracture, and that began with the plane of Duskmourn.
A plane that is entirely a sentient, malevolent haunted house controlled by the demon Valgavoth.
And Valgavoth is explicitly using the new, chaotic omen paths as literal traps.
Luring in prey from unsuspecting worlds. Horror is taking advantage of convenience. And this leads us to the critical defining action of this era. Jace Beleren.
Jace survived completion during the March of the Machine, and hidden away, he attempted a factory reset of the entire multiverse using the creature Lute's living map, a living guide to all existence.
So the planeswalker who manipulates minds decided to manipulate reality itself. What was the fallout of that unprecedented act?
It reportedly shattered reality like glass. The consequences have been catastrophic and immediate. First, Nicol Bolas has returned.
Presumably freed by the fracturing and destabilization of his prison realm.
And second, planar boundaries are destabilizing completely. We are seeing real-world, in-universe examples of planar physics breaking down, like Lorwyn experiencing a permanent eclipse between its day and night aspects.
The lines between worlds are dissolving. If we look back across this entire 5,000-year span, the history of the multiverse is entirely defined by the evolution of how its inhabitants travel between planes. We started with the Thran's static mana portals.
Fixed points of transfer. Then we had the early artifact skyships like the Weatherlight.
That evolved into the ultimate power of the godlike, pre-mending spark. Then the spark was domesticated into the mortal, fragile, post-mending spark.
And now, the current age. Shattered boundaries, bypassed by natural omen paths, and potentially manufactured by the Aether Spark. The reliance on the godlike individual is clearly fading.
This raises a critical point. The boundaries between worlds never truly healed the same way again after a major cosmic event. The Silex blast caused isolation. The mending restored stability by reducing power. But now, after the new Phyrexian Invasion and Jace's reality fracture,
the multiverse is approaching a point of ultimate, irreversible convergence. Here is where it gets really interesting.
So the future story isn't just about fighting external monsters. It's about the deliberate, active power to reshape, combine, or erase reality itself.
This history suggests we are heading toward either a new dark, a social and magical collapse caused by the intermingling of conflicting realities.
Or perhaps a second mending that is far more dramatic, where the distinction between planes dissolves entirely into a fragmented, blended reality. We are literally watching the map become the territory.
So we leave you with this final provocative thought. If a planeswalker can simply attempt to factory reset reality, and the consequences result in the fundamental shattering of the cosmos, how does any individual planar conflict, a single invasion, a single resource war, still matter? What happens when the map becomes the territory and reality itself is just a constantly editable file? That's what we are all left to mull over as the multiverse descends into its new fractured age.